Hello and welcome to Equipped, the Emotion Intelligence podcast. I'm Aaron Garner and this is Harry Lansley and this is episode 2. The week has flown past so quickly. Harry, what are we talking about today?
So today I thought we'd talk about public speaking. It's presented in general to individuals but also large crowds. One of the things we get asked a lot, well, Aaron gets asked a lot because Aaron does most of the public speaking for us, is how do you prepare for it? You've won awards, you get called away to do speeches all the time, you are exceptionally good at it. I think a lot of the people who come through our courses almost look up to the way you present and how you present. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to ask you a couple of questions about how you prepare, how you get into the mental state to deliver those talks, and whether there's any tips you have for people who might be looking to get into it or people who've been doing it for a while and are looking to develop a bit further.
I will try my best. Thank you very much for the compliments. Don't take compliments well, British and all that. But yeah, I will do my best. So, from a public speaking point of view, I think everyone can do it. It's one of those things that people think if you're up on stage and stuff and you're presented to large groups of people, it's really nerve-wracking. And it can be, but it needs to be reframed. But I come from a place of being painfully shy. So when I was a kid at school, the idea of having to speak in front of the class or get up in front of the class and do anything was hideous. But over the years of meeting the right people and being in the right groups and practice, I think it starts to come with time. So fire away and I'll try my best on anything you ask.
So you said initially shy and then meeting the right people, developing over time. Was it a bit by bit process, or was there a particular moment where you were like, well, actually, I enjoy this and I'm pretty good at it?
I think the early stages of public speaking and presenting, I was still nervous.
Right.
So I'll put that in inverted commas, nervous. But now I reframe it as excitement and I enjoy that process. But probably, I don't know, a couple of decades ago when I was sort of learning more about self-confidence and the kind of psychological game of self-confidence, which links very much into that emotional intelligence aspect that we talk about, that impact of knowing that public speaking and presentation isn't just a physical game and isn't just about the words that you say, but it's also about that psychological battle that's going on inside our heads. And right. I think as a young person at school, that concept of I'm going to be judged, people don't want to hear what I want to say, why would anyone want to listen to me, that kind of negative internal dialogue that can derail any public speaker is something that sort of being aware of that and working on that is certainly that first turning point when you become aware of that kind of negative self-talk and the stories we tell ourselves that probably aren't helpful for performance, not just in public speaking and presenting, but in any walk of life. So I think that's probably the realization point of that. Wait a minute, what am I telling myself this for? So
right, and that's the way you kind of manage that kind of level of anxiety away. I mean, is it away or is it?
No, I don't think it's a way. So again, from an emotional intelligence point of view, we come back to our 4 quadrants. I think of public speaking, we talk about you've got your self-awareness, you've got your self-management, you've got your social awareness and that interaction management piece. So those 4 quadrants are all at play in public speaking. So the self-awareness of how do I feel right now in my body, but cognitively as well, what's going on for me right now, and I need to be aware of that so that I can manage that. And I need to be aware of that before I come on stage, whether that's having a conversation like this or whether that's going on stage in front of lots of people. You need to be aware of that so that you're in the right physicality and the right mental state and the right emotional state. And sometimes that takes a reframe. So yes, I can acknowledge that there's some level of anxiety or nerves. What can I do about that? Maybe I can take a breath. Maybe I can do some affirmations or some kind of mantra. So that works for some people. You're running something through in your mind. Knowing your stuff, obviously, is important. Not trying to blag is important. So being aware that if something comes up, in particular, if a question comes from the audience or from a class, and I don't know the answer, being confident enough to say, you know what, I don't know that. rather than having to know everything and be the expert in the room, because too many people blag. And so I think if you embrace the fact you don't know everything, that helps as well. So you know what you know and be prepared to talk about that, but don't try and blag too far. That's also
Yeah, I mean that's a good point, because the irony of trying to answer things that you don't know is people think about, if I don't know the answer to a particular question, it shows my lack of credibility. It means I don't know this field, I don't know everything within it. But whenever I've watched people talk, you talk, I feel like when someone's got the confidence to be like, you know what, I've got absolutely no idea, but let me look into it, it gives credibility. And I think there's this kind of misunderstanding that people can sometimes have, where actually not having the answers can actually make you come across more credible, because you've got the confidence to put that out there.
Yeah, definitely. And we're always learning as well. So even if you're on stage presenting, it's typically, as you know, when I present, we try and engage as much as possible. But in some situations like a keynote or something like that, when you've got lots of people in front of you, there's not as much room for engagement, but you can still learn from the experience as well. And sometimes those questions from the audience and stuff, when they get thrown at you, it's an opportunity to realize, oh, there's a gap in my knowledge. I've not thought about it that way. So we can, rather than being threatened by questions in public speaking contexts, take them as opportunities to improve your knowledge base, because typically what we talk about is that iceberg above the water, but there's lots of stuff underneath that's cool stuff that we could talk about, that we should develop out, because you'll get left field questions all the time. And yeah, that blagging doesn't help you from a credibility point of view, as you said, and it definitely doesn't help the people that you've just potentially misinformed.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's really important, to go in knowing what you do know and what you want to talk about. Managing your state before you go on, it's important. So breath work, mindfulness is important. You have to be mindful of your state from moment to moment, so that you can pick up on when you are starting to shallow breathe. For example, if you start to get nervous and impact your breathing, and your pitch starts going hard, you start speeding up in your words and those kinds of things. Yeah, being able to stop, take a dramatic pause, take a deep breath, can help oxygenate you, which is useful for the nerves itself, but also just allows you to project a bit more as well. So I think that physical state's really important. And also you've got the self-awareness piece, which leads to the self-management piece, either before or during, and after, obviously. But there's also the social awareness aspect as well. So I'm watching who I'm watching. So I'm watching you right now. I'm not obviously in a one-to-one. You're watching the other person that you're speaking to. But also in a group situation, you're watching how that message is perceived, which is why I got into this field in the first place, because I wanted to know that the messages that are being delivered are hitting home in the right way. So if you start to see cynicism or contempt or something on people's faces, what have I just said that people might not be agreeing with, or I may offend someone with something I say, so do I need to readjust or just touch on something that I've just said to make sure that the message I'm saying is being received the way I want it to be received? So that social awareness piece is really important. And then obviously the interaction management is part of that loop. So that interaction management is, I'm getting this response, okay, I'm going to change the way, perhaps to see if I can change the response. And again, it comes back to that emotional awareness definition of it's our ability to perceive, understand, and influence our own and other people's emotions. And I think as a public speaker, I did a talk about this once, and it's you have a great deal of power as a public speaker, because your words can make a big difference. You can clearly offend people very, very easily. You can motivate people to act. There's lots of different things. So as a public speaker, especially if people actually want to listen to what you're saying rather than they just happen to be in the room, you can really take people on a journey. And I think emotional intelligence allows you to think of the best way to keep yourself in the right frame to facilitate that journey, but also manage and influence that journey for the other people that are listening, whether it's a learning situation or more of a public speaking kind of keynote, which I guess is learning as well, but less engagement with the audience.
So just picking up on the influence side of things, because there's 1,000 articles out there telling people how to improve their body language when they're presenting to help get that message home. You know, there's certain behaviors, you know, power poses and changing stage directions and all this kind of stuff about if you adopt these things, you will have more success in delivering your message. How much weight do you put on that kind of thing?
So I personally don't use particular poses or anything like that. So breath work, yes, making sure that you've got good breath control and you can project and you're speaking from high in the chest, and those sorts of tips for speaking are useful, whether it's in this context, in a podcast like this. The hand positions, power posing can be useful if you are trying to convey an appearance of somebody that is a confident public speaker. So if you're not confident in public speaking, then things like power poses, the research suggests that it does increase feelings of confidence and feelings of power, but not to the extent to which we originally thought back in the day when power poses and those kinds of things were talked about more. So Amy Cuddy's work and the TED Talk that became a very famous TED Talk. And originally we thought it kind of increased testosterone and those kind of things and reduced cortisol whenever you held these poses, and there's less replicated studies on that. But it does increase, if you stand strongly and powerfully and you stand in a certain way, then it can increase that. But in my opinion, and this is just the way I practice, it's about trying to be as close as possible to who you are and authentically present. Now, ums and ahs, for example, I've ummed and ahed a few times in this. Now, at Toastmasters, for example, when you do Toastmasters International, when you do kind of training and speeches and those kinds of things, your ums and ahs are counted. And people get very hung up on not umming and not ahhing. And if you do it too much, it can cause a bit of a distraction for the audience.
Yeah.
I do it quite a bit, though, in natural speech. So I do and ah, I do fill my pauses, and I don't really care that much, to be fair. It's how I speak. So I try, even in this context, when I'm talking to the camera and to you, if I and ah, if I hear myself do it, it's like, I've just ummed. But I don't let that bother me.
Yeah.
Equally with how my hands are. Clearly, I'm not going to start crossing my arms. And if I do this, it feels very unnatural to do this. And every gesture should have a purpose. It's something you learn in public speaking school, essentially.
Yeah.
So, but as you know, my hands are generally all over the place, and they don't really have a purpose. But so my illustrating gestures, when my hands are moving around to reinforce the words that I'm using, sometimes reinforce the words that I'm using, and sometimes are just kind of flailing around. And that's kind of natural. So people that have seen me speak a lot realize I use my hands a lot and my eyebrows. So my eyebrows mark quite a bit. So there's lots of things that I do that I just embrace. That's the way I speak. And I think if I personally try to act like a presenter and try to do some of the things that are taught to make you look more confident and more credible as a presenter, it doesn't feel like me. Now, some of those things I do automatically, and I think as you become more confident, you automatically start to do those things. So I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg kind of thing. You can fake it till you make it is one of the things that has been talked about, well, since William James, like early psychology. So it does work. But I think be authentic, know your topic. When you're on point and talking about something that you're passionate about, I think people can kind of get that.
Yeah.
And we've had conversations before about, someone could be talking about anything. I don't know much about drums, but when you talk about drums, you're passionate about it, and I'm really interested. I probably am not going to go and play drums, but I'll listen because people are on point when they talk about things that they're passionate
100%.
about.
And for me, with very little experience in the field, but just as a spectator and watching people, I couldn't care less how they behave on stage so much, providing they're passionate about what they're talking about. And it's easy to tell when someone's passionate and then when someone's almost got this script in the head that they're trying to deliver, because it almost looks robotic. You know, these gestures come in and they navigate the stage, and you might as well just be listening to Siri read out that presentation. And I think a lot of the people I spoke to who have been starting out in public speaking is because they're nervous, they feel like learning a script is like their safety net. If I've got the script, I can get through my script. That communicates what I need to. And they put more emphasis on that as opposed to what's my key message. And it's almost like having those 2, 3, even one bullet point in your head of that's my key message. I know enough about the subject. I'm passionate enough about the subject. Just hit the play button and roll with it. And you'll nail it. And this is one of the things I've heard you say to people as well, was generally speaking, if you're doing a talk, you probably know what you're talking about. Otherwise, you're making a terrible mistake. Chances are you know more than 99.99% of the people on that topic than all those other people in the room. So trust yourself. And I think that was a really good tip, because I think a lot of the people, especially like you hear imposter syndrome is a big thing. And I think a lot of that is that irrational fear that you're going to get caught out. I mean, speaking of which, do you still suffer from imposter syndrome in certain scenarios, talks?
I do, yeah. And I think I will hold my hands up, and I'm a card-carrying member of the Imposter Syndrome Club. And I think a lot of public speakers do. And again, coming back to emotional intelligence, it's being aware of the fact that some of the things that you tell yourself. And if before you go on stage, you're starting to think about, why am I here? I don't deserve to be here. I don't know enough about this. Coming back to your point around, you know more than the people in the room. Now, you may not. There might be a couple of people there that are experts in the field as well. But if you go in with that kind of attitude, then it's going to be difficult. But I mean, one of our students did a study on imposter syndrome and in the acting community and the impact of kind of mindfulness and those kind of things on that. And so I think if you are mindful and have the ability to do kind of mindful practice, even if it's just breath work or something, take a break, think about the words, the story I'm telling myself, it can really help with imposter syndrome. And over time, you'll get feedback, but even that doesn't help, if you suffer from imposter syndrome. And it'd be interesting to see, obviously, in the comments, actually, how many people out there are public speakers, and how does imposter syndrome factor within your public speaking? Because I've spoken to a lot of public speakers, and they are all, at some point, have some level of imposter syndrome. That feeling that you shouldn't be there, you're not entitled to be there, and those kinds of things. So it's an interesting area, and one that you can deal with good emotional intelligence and good mindfulness, in my opinion.
Nice. So if we were just to bring this to a close, then is there a couple of top tips you would give someone who's either aspiring to get into public speaking or is just looking to upskill in those areas?
I think so. I think the top tip would certainly be breath work. I think that's important, just to make sure that you're breathing well, because and breathe out as well, because a lot of people take a deep breath before you go on stage, but make sure you breathe out as well, because if you take a deep breath in and hold it, you go and so take a few deep breaths in, a few deep breaths out, fully expel the air rather than and just keep breathing in. That's not useful. So good breath work is useful. It helps you to project, breathe from lower down, try not to breathe higher up in the chest. All that kind of stuff is very, very useful. But good mindfulness. Now, again, when we talk about mindfulness, we don't mean being meditative practice necessarily. So being able to just stop, be in the moment. How do I feel? What am I thinking? What kind of messages am I telling myself? What's my message, as you've just mentioned, what are my key messages I want to convey in this particular area? So that self-awareness of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, self-management, mindfulness to facilitate those two things, and then be aware of how your messages are impacting on the people you're speaking to. but don't take that too far, because not everyone in a room is going to agree with you.
Yeah.
And some people might show a facial expression of anger or disgust or contempt or something, but it might not be anything to do with what you've just said. It's something else that's on their mind. So yes, you can kind of read an audience, but don't let that derail you and start to throw off negative thoughts in the moment as well. Just check yourself, take a breath, carry on, convey your messages, and go from there. So yeah, I'd say emotional intelligence, self-awareness, self-management, in particular from you, mindfulness, breath work, and those things will see you solid through most public speaking.
Thank you very much.
No problem at all.
And that wraps up episode 2 on public speaking. So we'll be back next week with a new episode. Again, please help us out in the comments if there's anything you'd like us to discuss. We will see you next week.
See you later.
All the best.